and welcome to another Travels with Tricia. I'm here in England this time for the Witney Antiques exhibition of needlework. This is the third in 3 exhibitions over 3 years talking about 17th century needlework. And we're going to go inside and we're going to have a tour of the exhibition by Rebecca Scott, the owner. Well, let's get in the backpack and go inside because there's a lot of great stuff in there.
I needed to show you the exhibition room and just to give you an idea of the extensive inventory of 17th century to early 18th century pieces that are on display during the exhibition. There are 3 rooms. This is the primary room of the exhibition, another room with many 17th century pieces, and then the rooms nearest the front, which have quite a few 18th and 19th century samplers, which are the normal yearly stock held by Witney. If you ever have a chance on your itinerary in mid-October and early November to attend one of the exhibitions at Witney, it is well worth it.
So hello, Rebecca Scott from Witney Antiques, and thank you so much for having us at the exhibition and allowing all the viewers on Flosstube to take a look at some specific pieces and enjoy the stories that you have to tell.
Well, I'm just really delighted that you're here, Trish, and that you can see the fruits of Witney Antiques' labour for the last, few years, really. So the exhibition, this year's exhibition, really centres around a suite of needlework which was found contained in a casket, which is here. And unlike the majority of the objects in the exhibition, and certainly all the other caskets in the exhibition, this is not needlework, it is 17th century decoupage. And the box is entirely decorated in cut and coloured paper prints, and arranged in a very similar manner to a lot of the way that you would expect a 17th century embroidered casket to be arranged. And I mean, we have had this little conversation earlier on about the source of these prints. So I think we both agree that they were taken from both books and from published sheets of patterns of figurative, floral, faunal prints, some of which would have been pre-coloured and some of which were purchased black and white and were then coloured by the girl herself.
And I think I said to you that I have seen caskets with the original print on some of these in it. And I'm going to send that to you, but I'll probably show the audience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean,
where some of these have come from.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely fascinating.
And what gets me about this, when looking at it from a little bit of afar, like through the lens here, is that it looks like it's a print. But it's when you really get up close to it, do you realize that you're absolutely right. These are all cut, teeny tiny paper cutouts that this girl has done. It's amazing.
And so what we have surmised from the family history, because this was purchased direct from the family in which it descended, is that the likely worker of this box is a girl called Elizabeth Colleton. And she is raised until the age of about 7 in Barbados.
Which is really unusual.
Yeah, so from a merchant background. And the family then moved back to England, and it is likely that she is being educated at one of the girls' boarding schools in London. And in fact, within the last few months, a number of what they call floorboard finds have been discovered under the floorboards of a National Trust property in Hackney, now known as Sutton House, but which during the 17th century we know was the home of a girls' school. And in the floorboard finds are little paper cutouts of exactly the same type as are seen on
Which
this
is wonderful. And I know
casket.
that has been on your Instagram page, correct?
Yes.
So people could go there and look for that.
Yeah, and so we know that as a form of decoration, this was being taught in schools. Hannah Woolley describes it in the 1660s. We actually we know that she is teaching in Hackney. So whether or not this is something which was taught under her instruction,
It would be amazing if it is.
I mean, there's no way of knowing,
Right.
but for certain, until we
Right.
something turns up that says it is. The box inside, and it is fully illustrated in the catalogue, is in the same form, so with the same compartments, so they're slightly larger in scale, as the Elizabeth Hall casket from last year. But in this instance, the lining fabric is pale blue silk, as opposed to the salmon pink silk.
Actually, you just brought up a great point, that you have a catalog that goes with this particular exhibition. Is it
Yes.
possible for us to take a quick look at it? Just to show that many of the viewers have seen the catalog from last year, but this one is even bigger and better.
Well, this one is twice as big. It's 240 pages, and it weighs twice as much.
Yes,
So,
of course. But you have some, not only are the objects shown, but there are essays on the objects.
Yeah, this has a great deal more research, and it's really a book.
It's really a book.
It really isn't just, it's a book with a catalogue section,
Yes.
but it is,
It is original research which has been presented by a number of authors.
yes.
And many of these authors might be familiar to the watchers. You have essays by yourself.
Yeah.
And by Isabella Rosner.
Yeah,
And Katie Strahan.
yeah,
And Alison Smith.
yes.
Did I
That's it.
catch everybody?
Yeah, you caught everybody. Yeah, you caught everybody. And so we have, the essays really are, first of all, to describe some background to the 17th century and to some of these objects specifically, but they also are there to answer a few questions that are commonly asked. So, for example, how do you know that something's worked professionally or as opposed to being worked by a schoolgirl or as opposed to being worked by an adult amateur? And so we've tried, and we have taken two case studies.
Right.
One is a group of 17th century band samplers, and discussed the way that they are stitched in detail and comparing a group, so we can identify
Right.
another group of
Right.
that we believe to be taught under the same instruction. And the second case study is
By Alison.
by Alison is actually showing how an object which are absolutely typical of the 17th century and found in caskets were made.
Right.
Then that's the sort of spiral,
Yes.
coiled
The coiled
pinballs
or
and
boxes.
trinket boxes.
Right. And I'm one of the lucky ones who still has a kit of hers for that.
You mean you haven't worked it?
I've been kind of busy on the caskets.
Oh, well, okay, I'll let you off. But yes, so here we've got, and so it is a pretty lengthy tome. It's full colour illustration. Here's the box
Right.
page.
Right.
And
Inside.
there's
and
the
everything.
inside.
Right. But I think it's just all, I think we're going to talk about this later, but about how you've saved pieces because you wanted to be able to do this book. And so you saved pieces, you did extreme conservation on them to protect them. and then have put it all together in this exhibit so that you have this really essentially 3-book series.
Yeah.
And on the work you've been doing for, you said 10 years? It's
Yeah,
really,
from
this is about
start to
10
finish,
years.
This is about 10 years that's gone into the working of these books. And so I hope that it will give people a better understanding of just the breadth of objects that were part of a girl's education in the 17th century. And yeah, I mean, I'm very proud
I think
of
you
it.
should be really proud of them all.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah.
I'm very proud of all of them, and I feel that this is the sort of culmination, if you like.
I could tell.
So it's 240 pages and it's full colour, and it's hardback again, like the Elizabeth Hall one
Right,
was.
the Elizabeth Hall ones, and of course it goes with it quite nicely. So hopefully will be on sale soon, so that those who are in love with embroidery of this time can read all this new research. So tell me who she was. You said that she was from Barbados, and she went back to England, and she maybe was at Sutton House, maybe under Woolley.
Yeah, potentially. So she was the family history is actually outlined in the book. So I'm not going to spoil it for too many people. But she is essentially the daughter of wealthy mercantile parents. There is a title in the family, and the objects then passed. So she's called Elizabeth Colleton. The box, and it's 2 trinket boxes.
Right, they're beautiful.
Are then descend in the family and end up in the Oldham family, who were had a button making, manufacturing and retailing business in London. And from there it descends through the family. And the box contained the most amazing array of textile related objects. So we've got a little silk hussif, we have a textile covered account and day book.
That's right, with the gold thread on it.
Yeah.
And you go through in the book about what was actually in the little day book, which is so sweet.
Yes.
Yes.
So it has a list which actually includes nutmegs.
Yeah.
So
you're really personal with this. I mean, the pieces, they bring you to the woman's life.
Yes. And so in the exhibition here, we have got the objects which fit broadly into the time frame of the exhibition. But there are a further, I think 30 or 40, perhaps even more, objects which are from a much later, or from a later period, but which continue the story. And really talk about, that sort of squirreling away that families do, and passing on.
They put everything in the box.
They put everything in the box, and it goes on to the next generation.
The next generation, right.
And it's what's quite moving about it is that it really speaks of ancestral pride.
Yeah.
One generation keeping the effects of another generation's and keeping it safe. And I think that's one of the things which, when you look at the caskets, whether they be paper or whether they be needlework, is it's imagining. You sit in front of the casket and you think about, what am I going to put in it? What treasures am I going to hide in there?
Yes, I think that's one of the things my students just get really excited about, is what they're going to put into the... Sometimes they get a little too excited about it, so they make all the little things that will go into the drawers, and they don't get to the embroidery on the box.
Well,
but it's all about the journey. It's about it's about the journey, really.
Yeah.
And the imagination and all of that. Now, I think there were some things over here that were related to the box.
So, as well as the various books and needleworked objects, there are also 2 whitework samplers. So this short whitework sampler, this was within the box.
Do you think it was worked by her?
No, well, it's initialed MK.
Oh, okay.
So it certainly is of the same, I'm sure it's of the same period, but who MK is, we don't know.
Right.
But it is initialed MK. But that was found in the box. And then second, with these 4 pieces, actually they were joined, not quite in this way, but panels of whitework, of a whitework band sampler, or actually possibly a sampler that was perhaps a bit squarer in formation. But you know, these 4 cut panels of whitework were also found within the box. So
That's a conundrum.
yeah, and we don't know the order, and we don't quite know how they fit together. So we've chosen to display them as 4
Right.
separate pieces.
It's interesting because they do have some irregular borders on either side of them that kind of imply, especially the bottom 2, that they belong together.
Yes.
And I wonder whether or not there was any, I mean, this is totally hypothetical idea, is that sometimes you did see pieces split to give to different members of the family. Do you think horror of horrors that maybe that happened?
Yeah, I mean, like, as you said, these 2.
Right, right.
You can see that they are clearly, you know, they're at least they're under the same working. They're under the same, you know, it's the same linen ground. I simply don't know. I don't know why it would be cut. Why, but at least as it's just standing as examples, they are very.
Oh, they're wonderful. They're beautiful work.
Lovely.
And you have one that's not related to this grouping that's on the side, and I think that'll be our last.
Well, this is in my opinion, in my humble opinion, is one of the most lovely whitework band samplers that I've come into contact with. The work is of a very, very, very high standard, and not, you know, it's not without precedent, but relatively rare in the whitework band sampler world. You have this wonderful pictorial panel of Adam and Eve with their fig leaves.
Yes.
Covering their modesty. And just, I mean, the work is amongst the very best that you see on.
I know we're going to talk about this later, about the care that you take in not just preserving, but presenting these pieces. And I had seen this piece previous to you acquiring it, and the linen is not cut behind here, which of course made it so that this particular panel just was not really seen. And you've done this amazing job of making it seen in a way that's preserving at the same time.
Well, you know, you're not going to cut out.
No, of course not.
But it gives that impression, so you
Right.
get to see what the panel would look like.
Right.
If, like most other examples, it has been
Cut.
let into a
So that you must
square.
have thought a long time on how to go about doing that. Then.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important. You know, if you've got such wonderful work, you want to be able to see it.
Yes. Yes. Well, this is wonderful.
So they are the 3 whitework pieces that are in the exhibition, and
Well, let's go on and see one of the caskets.
so this group of objects here all came from the Sir Frederick Richmond collection, and they weren't involved in any of their 3 landmark sales of the Richmond collection, but they were retained by the family until within the last couple of years, and they all show remarkable condition and originality in them. So
lovely.
here we have a 17th century casket. This casket is actually slightly unusual because it has a side.
Oh, I had wondered about that in the book.
So there, this is actually something you don't see very often with this side.
I don't know if I've ever seen
Slide.
one. And the drawer goes all the way through.
The drawer goes all the way through, so you don't have. You can actually. I can put this here. So you can lift this part up, but the rest of it doesn't lift. You know, so quite often you can
Right.
take out the whole piece. You
And of course those
have-
slides,
These
yes.
slide out,
Right.
and you've got a drawer underneath in below, and sliding back in. But that's
And you have the 4 bottles, which are also just beautiful.
and you have the 4 original bottles, and the quill pen was within it. Now, whether or not it was worked by the same,
And it looks like the color of the paper is still reasonably good on the back, on that
Yes.
side panel.
so we were talking
Yeah,
about this
we were
earlier
talking about
with
this
this
earlier.
purple,
Right.
and there you've got the purple. In. I would think that this dates to probably, no, I'm going to put it in the wrong way, but I would think this dates to probably around about 16, late 1660s, 1670-ish. It's possible that it could be a fraction later. So this is the quill pen that came within the casket.
Wonderful.
Now, whether it started off life there or not, we simply don't know. But certainly by Richmond's time, it was together. Also, here is a pointer, is a beadwork pointer, which again the family kept in the collection until the last couple of years. And I have never actually seen.
I have not either.
I have never seen a pointer before, but I'm presuming it was used to point out the words while somebody was teaching or reading from a Bible or reading a book of Psalms or whatever it was.
Right.
So they could point the
amazing.
words out. And then, sort of appropriately to having conversation with that, is the Rococo or Queen Stitch book case pouch with its original book in, and we actually do have it named. And I can
Named meaning the person who
the person who
owns the
originally-
book.
Yes, who originally
I
owned
think
the
I
book.
read that in the book, and I think everybody should get the book because it is so well written.
Right.
So many interesting
So
articles.
Sarah Yates, or Yates, 1658, November 1658. And the book is actually published in 1654.
Oh, wonderful.
So very,
Very.
very early and very, lovely that the two have stayed together. And
With that type of design, do you think that she may have done the book cover for herself, the bookcase?
I think so. I mean, when I first looked at it, I thought possibly it was a little bit later. But actually, I think it's, now having revisited it and looked at it, there are enough examples of this type of work on pieces that date from the sort of around about the 1660 period. So I think it's absolutely, yeah.
One thing I noticed about it is that several of the Queen Stitch motifs are identical or seemingly identical to motifs on Martha Edlund's pieces.
Yes. And also the green silk, which you do sometimes see in,
Yes,
that
in
she's
the-
used here, is
Right.
absolutely typical of the period.
Right.
For you see it lining caskets
Right.
as well as
Right.
the more familiar salmon pink.
It's such a effective treatment to have the dark green background.
Oh yeah,
Just really lovely.
it's absolutely, and it's I think it's just just fascinating that these things actually have stayed in the condition that they have stayed in, because they really are. This would have been taken in and out and used on a regular basis, probably on a daily basis.
Yes,
So,
it's phenomenal. It's a beautiful condition, just beautiful
Yeah.
condition.
and presumably that's why the family decided to keep these 4 objects back from
Right.
the sales.
Right. Okay.
So, here we've got 3 very very distinctive mirrors. The first one on the left is worked in beads. The surround is actually we've recoated it with faux tortoiseshell. If anybody's
Ever, yeah.
worried about tortoiseshell. But what's lovely about this mirror is it's very, very distinctively drawn and worked by a child. There's a very juvenile, folky quality to it. Very different from the professional mirrors, beadwork mirrors that you see. And there are a group of clearly related beadworks worked in the sort of 1660s with these very funky animals and the really oversized floral motifs.
The upper left, do you think that that is a giraffe or a fantastical animal?
I don't know. I think it's supposed to be a giraffe. I believe, I mean, whilst there weren't giraffes brought into this country until, I think, as I understand it, until the 18th century, I think that in the 17th century they certainly were recorded.
Yeah, there's an animal that's that shape, which is in the Overton or the Walton, pattern books for young ladies, and I wonder whether or not the child took that pattern.
I think that they've all been taken from pattern books. I mean, these are very clearly taken from herbals,
right.
But there is a sort of fantastical element to them. So, you have different flowers growing from the same stem. But I do think that, I just think it's so quirky and charming.
Yeah.
And I love the use of the transparent beads in the background, which gives it a real sort of glittery quality.
Very much so. Are they transparent, or do they have the? Some of them almost look like they have, but maybe not.
Some of them have a small stripe in them.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if you can pick that up on there, but some of them actually do have a stripe in them. Some of them are transparent, and then some of them have flecks of something for sure in them.
Really nice.
Yeah, I think it's lovely. And then we have a much more typical, much more what you're used to seeing, shaped embroidered mirror surround.
But smaller than often I see.
It is. It's reasonably diminutive. It possibly, I would think it was made for a tabletop.
It's so sweet.
It's very sweet. Very sweet.
Really, really sweet.
And it's the virtues, the subject on it, which, and again you have this sort of cockerel, cockatrice, with a parrot, which is the same as you see on the Nellum.
Yes.
Underdrawing.
It is really sweet.
And so that's more typical of what of what schoolgirls would have been working. And then you move on to the rolled paper mirror, which is another skill that girls would have been learning in school. Here she's got a number of cut paper prints, which she's incorporated into it, and quilling or rolled paperwork is advertised and taught, I think probably to a lesser degree than embroidery, but it was nonetheless one of the decorative skills that girls were learning in. And this dates from about sort of 1680.
I've seen a few pieces in the States and collections that have an embroidered center and the quilling around the outside of it.
Yes.
Have you seen those?
Yes.
Yeah.
And you see them. There's a series of them as well, which show portraits of either James II or William and Mary, with the quilling behind them. And I think they were probably professionally done. This, when you look at the house and so on,
Right,
I think is almost certainly worked in school.
Right.
And that actually can be compared.
Oh, I know. This is a beautiful
to
piece.
to this coat of arms, which is worked by a member of the Petrie family, and actually in the book we identify who we believe to be the maker. Mm-hmm. But the working of a coat of arms in rolled paperwork would, and if we're correct about the girl that we believe it to have been worked by, this would place it in the sort of, again, at the same period as the mirror, the sort of late 17th century. And in this instance, she's used coloured paper and gilded paper. But it's...
And a beautiful mica background.
a lovely, lovely, lovely...
It's hard to see on video. I'm moving it a little bit to see if I can catch the sparkle.
yeah.
And there's several caskets that have the rolled paper on it. I know you mentioned it in the catalog.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, you get other things. I've seen picture frames as well.
Yes.
And small objects. There are a number of trinket boxes which are worked with rolled paperwork at this or approximately this period. Actually, I suppose in the same way as the little beadwork trinket box there is worked by a schoolgirl,
Right.
as a small project, which I think is quite an interesting point, because in this cabinet there are a number of small objects. So we've got the bellows purse there from a slightly later period, the Valentine. And these smaller projects were clearly worked during the course of a girl's education, but probably at the same time, or perhaps to give her a break from working a bigger,
totally agree.
a bigger project like a casket or something.
Right.
And then we kind of have the mother of all
Oh,
sewing
yes.
projects, and that is the egg.
Which is incredible. Survival.
As a survival, it is just the most amazing survival. And as far as I am aware, is currently the only known
I would think so.
surviving
Can you imagine how
example.
few were probably made, and then how few could make it till this time?
Well,
Incredible.
absolutely. It's a chicken egg. It's a chicken's egg. And the holes would have been drilled through, because one of the first questions that people get to say is, how on earth can you embroider
Yes.
an egg? So after the egg was blown, the egg was drilled, and a series of threads were introduced, and they were then pulled through with needles. And actually, I don't know if I could really explain how it's worked, because the whole concept of embroidering through an eggshell is just so phenomenal.
I think Isabella was explaining it to somebody yesterday, and from what I understood, what she said was that, as you say, the thread being put through the holes was putting us basically a support there, then other thread could be used on the top of the egg.
Yes, and embroidered and held in place.
Right. That made sense to me in my head.
But I still, the whole idea of somebody being actually able to do that without either breaking the shell,
yes,
or without can you imagine just pulling that thread just
my
little
God.
bit too tightly?
Too tight,
and the whole thing goes. I mean, that must have happened, of course. So
right.
It's
a phenomenal.
It is a phenomenal piece.
Yes.
I mean, it's a very, very, very rare survival.
As so many of the pieces here are.
Yeah, I mean, it's taken a long time to put them together.
I know. Maybe you should say a little bit about how you had saved some items for this exhibition.
Well, we've been saving items for this exhibition for probably some of them for approaching 10 years.
Wow.
Because, I always knew that I wanted to do the exhibition, and you can't just conjure these things up overnight.
No.
It takes a lot of time, and you have to be able to save them.
Yes.
And keep them. So inevitably, you can't keep everything.
Right.
But we tried very hard to keep things that would illustrate the breadth of schoolgirl
Right.
education in the period from 1650-ish to 1770.
Well, I think it also has allowed you to pull together a series of books to illustrate the exhibitions
Yeah.
that can say something.
Yeah.
And I think that's very wonderful, and it's commendable.
Thank you. Well, it's really because you want to expand people's understandings.
Yes.
And it's just like the Elizabeth Hall last year's exhibition actually showed people that Quakers were not working just plain,
Yeah,
you know,
plain sewing.
plain sewing.
Yeah,
They were being very decorative. They were living in a very
Yes.
colourful world.
Very colorful life, yes.
And I think by placing all these things together, you actually get some understanding that the girls were not these things were not worked in isolation. They were part of a educational, cultural revolution, really.
I agree with you 100% on that. Yes, yes. But I just do want to point out to the audience that there are groups of people who just love this material, and you completely are in love with this material. And so therefore you make decisions in your business that are about more than just selling a piece. It's completely obvious.
If you want to learn about things, you actually have to have them for long enough to actually give yourself the time to learn about them.
Yes.
And so, and we've done it with the samplers, but this early needlework and the band sampler exhibition and then last year's hall exhibition and now this year's exhibition really is to show people that that's, part of it is showing off. We want to show people that that's what we do.
Right.
We're not just buying and selling things. We do care really deeply and passionately about getting the girls' stories out there.
Yes, you do. Well, not only that, in caring for them, because I'm not sure that everybody realizes once an object comes from however you've gotten it, maybe from a family, maybe from a auction that a family has given it to, you take steps between then and now. And there's a lot of steps, aren't there?
There are a lot of steps. Everything if it's a framed piece, it has to come out of its frame very rarely. Well, band samplers were never framed originally anyway. And in fact, most of these panels would never have been framed originally. So you've got the choice of how you present it. It needs to be in a clean and stable condition when you present it, so everything gets cleaned. How you clean things depends on what materials are used in their making and what the ground fabric is, etc. And then everything is framed behind conservation glass. In the case of caskets.
Well, let me just make one mention, if you wouldn't mind, about the conservation glass. For those of us who've been walking around the exhibition this weekend, you think it's not framed with glass because the conservation glass is not just conservation, it's anti-reflective glass. And so you sometimes have to lean in and then go to the side before you could barely see that there actually is something there. It looks like there's nothing there.
Well,
you can see it.
You want to be able to present things in the clearest way.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
And it's relatively new to the market.
Yes.
Previously, the UV protective glass, museum glass, you could still see the glass there.
Yes.
And we do have one or two things where that glass has been used. Now, anything that comes in now all goes behind this latest.
Which is not a cheap material.
No, it's a very
very expensive material.
Very expensive.
But you're getting something for it.
Well, it means you can see things. It doesn't feel like there's a barrier between you and the object.
Which is what's been wonderful about walking around, especially some of the dimensional pieces, stumpwork pieces.
Yes.
Yes, it's fabulous. You feel like you could reach into the piece almost.
Well, hopefully, I have had a few people try and touch things. But yeah.
Now you were going to say something about what you do to the caskets when they come in.
Yeah. So the caskets will be surface cleaned. If you've got, if you've got lock plates or hinges that are loose, obviously they have to be fastened. Feet are one of the big things because they become detached.
Yes.
If, for example, we have a casket that has perhaps 3 original feet and another, we then have the business of copying
The feet.
a foot to make
Right.
to make a replacement for it. Braid is something else which very often gets detached because as it's being
Yes.
glued on and it dries out. So if for example a piece has the majority of it has the original braid, but you might be missing a piece, we would then reweave
Okay.
to match the original,
The pattern of the original.
and piece it in.
Yeah.
Because you don't want your eye to see, if you look at something and there's a chunk missing,
Yeah.
all you see is the missing chunk.
Right.
So, but I think as long as your customers know that, then
Right. You've identified that it's
Yeah.
a replacement piece of braid. Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so it just really goes to show that once a piece comes to you, there's an awful lot of expense that you go to make sure that the piece has a long life.
Has a long life because,
Yes.
and we are only the custodians of these things.
Right.
We live a very short time in their,
Right.
the space of time in their life. They'll be, they've been here for, in some cases, 400 years.
Exactly.
And they'll be here hopefully in another 400 years.
Right, because you've taken care of them and you've preserved it and you've made sure
Yeah.
that, because people maybe don't know that if they leave their embroidery out in the dust is actually little shards and they cut threads.
Yeah.
So that's why you have to clean them.
That's why they have to be surface cleaned. So
Yeah.
that at the point at which something goes behind a frame or goes into a glass case, you're not going to allow for degradation of the threads.
Right.
And so you really can't leave things in dusty, dirty condition.
Right.
And finding people who are able to do this work, because it is painstaking, takes, it's expensive and they're highly skilled.
Highly skilled, yes. And you've got quite a few that you work with, I'm sure.
Yes, I have 4 girls that work with me.
Yeah.
And they are all, I couldn't do it without them.
Yeah.
Their input is very important.
Right. And
as is Roy, who does all our framing.
Right.
That's immensely important.
Oh, and the framing is beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. Very, very effective for the pieces.
We work very hard at presenting them in the right way.
That's very obvious. Amazing piece of stump work.
So this is another piece from the Richmond sale, from the Richmond collection. Only in this case, this went through the 1987 sale, and then from there into a private collection, and from there to here. And this is really, truly amazing with the degree of three-dimensionality. The subject, which is this, I should explain, this piece is actually almost a twin to a piece that's in the V&A, which was previously in the collection of a collector called William Plender, and the two collectors were both collaborators in their needlework collection, and I suspect that they acquired them at the same time. They are certainly illustrated during the early part of the 20th century in numerous exhibition catalogues and articles in publications like The Connoisseur and Country Life.
Is this King Solomon?
So yes, the subject of both of them is Solomon. Solomon himself, the figure of Solomon, is actually totally worked in the round. So
he's a full doll.
So he's a full doll. And I suspect that possibly this is not worked by the girl herself. This is something that a girl could buy to attach to her needlework.
Like the Queen Mary casket at Windsor, potentially with the doll on top?
Yes. And I think that it's possible that you could buy this figure ready made. Now, as in most pieces of 17th century raised work or tent stitch, the figure of Solomon is there to look like Charles I, is made to look like Charles I. And this is really speaking to the idea of kingship and the power, justice of the realm. Interestingly here his hair is actually human hair.
Oh.
So that's a whole...
Yeah.
And something which I've never seen...
Unless they were cutting King Charles's hair and they were making dolls with it.
Possibly. Well, there was a sort of cult of Charles I.
Yes.
So it would be really interesting to, perhaps
DNA,
a DNA test should
test
be.
to it, yeah.
Something which I've never seen, however, on any of them is that his attendant is holding
I noticed that.
scales of justice. And I've never seen that on a
No, at first I
depiction.
wondered if it was the baby and that it was upside down and it looked so strange, but it was the scales.
Yeah.
Because the baby's on the other side.
It's the scales of justice.
But the baby itself, which we'll see in a second here,
the
is so interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's and again, actually worked again in the round. So perhaps that's also something which you purchased ready-made and applied. I mean, it's so three-dimensional.
Yes.
This piece is actually initialed and dated.
And what date is it?
It's dated 1673. And it's initialed BV. I really wish I knew who BV was.
Oh my goodness. Yes, wouldn't that be something, huh?
But so that convinces me that it's the work of it's predominantly the work of an amateur embroiderer.
But this is another example here, as I'm filming it, that it looks like there's no glass on this piece. But yet, I know you've gone to the extreme expense of putting this behind this conservation material just to show it to its...
You have to.
Oh my God. I mean, the glass would be so in the way if you were looking at these three-dimensional parts.
Yeah. And again here, on the oak tree, the acorns, I think these will also could be bought ready-made.
I totally agree with you on that as well. There's a little trinket box of them up in a casket in Scotland, National Museum. Where there's a couple extra pieces.
Yeah, and we had the Elizabeth Hall suite. We had the glass blackberries. And,
right. It's like they were getting ready for the next project.
Yeah, I think so. Mm-hmm. And Hannah Downs at the V&A has the same. Mm-hmm. She has examples of those glass fruits, glass bead fruits.
And it's so interesting. The woman has a three-dimensional Bible in her hand, or looks like a Bible in her hand. And then on the other side, is that a basket?
It's a jug.
Oh, it's a jug.
I think it's a jug.
Oh, okay. Oh, yes. Look at that. In beads. How beautiful. This one is just stupendous.
Yeah, I mean, you very rarely see raised work of this complexity and dimensionality.
But also just the three-dimensional figures is really something.
They really are.
Really something. So we were going to talk about hair work. That's what we were going to talk. Now that we talk about hair here, maybe who we don't know it is. So we were going to go along the wall here.
So now I think the panels that I'm about to point out to you are one of the most extraordinary things in the exhibition.
Spoken as somebody who loves the material, because it's always something that everybody else maybe walks by.
Yes, I mean it always takes me by surprise people's reaction when I say, "Oh, it's made of human hair," and some people absolutely recoil, and other people like myself just think, "Wow, how on earth do you work with hair?"
Yes,
and create
something beautiful.
These two amazing lace panels, and so what was its use? I mean, I think this is just purely got to be a demonstration of someone's skill.
Do you think that the cream color that's used, is that human hair too, or is it a little bit of silk?
That's silk. That's fine silk. So the faces and the cuffs, the hands are worked in silk, but the rest of it is all hair.
Have you looked at it really close to see whether or not there's different people's hair?
So there have to be different people's hair.
Because it seems shaded to me.
There's different colours, and actually when you look under magnification, you can see that there are different thicknesses of the hair.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, there is one piece known, which is much slimmer and longer, and I think it's believed that it was made to wear around the wrist as a bracelet.
Oh, I've heard of that one. Is that the one that's at the V&A?
Yes, that's at the V&A. But as to the purpose of these, or whether indeed they had a purpose, or whether they were just simply there to show somebody's phenomenal skill, I simply don't know.
It kind of makes me want to put a long strand in a needle and try it, not to make anything, but just to kind of see.
Well, I'd be really pleased to see you try that.
I need to grow my hair.
Yeah.
Because otherwise a short
No, it's okay.
strand.
My daughter has quite long hair. You
Does
can borrow
she?
some
Does she?
of hers,
Okay,
yeah.
we'll borrow some of hers. Yes.
Yeah,
Give it to you as a couple roses as a gift.
Yeah. But no, I mean the work involved and the skill level is.
It's always interesting to hear. That's why I like to ask you what you'd like to talk about, because you're surrounded by so many incredibly beautiful things, and it's interesting to find out what you find to be the most interesting things.
Well, I guess that because I see, a huge number of pieces, I'm lucky enough to see a huge number of pieces, I guess I probably get attracted to the things which I see less often. And hairwork lace like that,
yeah.
I've never owned any before, and and you don't see it. So that I find, that's what attracts me to that. And then another piece which I absolutely is one of my most favourite pieces, and it's this.
And I think probably people walked by this one yesterday as well at the opening.
And I think people don't. It's something you have to look at really closely.
It is. All of a
To
sudden
see
I
the skill,
this.
because with the exception of the wavy clouds in the sky, everything is worked in darning stitches.
And it's not apparent at first when you see it.
No, but it's just, you've got damask darning patterns and the fruits, and it actually has slightly the look of some of the Boston crewel work that you see in terms of its underdrawing. And we're used to seeing darning samplers, but we're really not used to seeing darning on this scale.
And this figural.
And
this.
I actually...
Oh, look how beautiful that is with its shine.
And I actually do wonder whether or not there isn't possibly a connection with some of the Norfolk samplers, because when you look at the vase with the flowers here, so possibly this was made as a sort of demonstration piece of either a teacher's skill or somebody's skill, what they could actually do when they were trying to mend.
So you think that the darning samplers were like the first, and this is kind of an example of what you could do with that learning. Is that what you're thinking of?
No, I think it's more likely to be just an absolute out and out demonstration of somebody's skill, perhaps to show their ability to teach, or perhaps to run a business in this is what we can do. But I think it's very, very, very rare to see a piece of darning work on this scale.
Yeah.
A few years ago, probably, I think it's in the Educated Stitch, I did have a darning sampler that had a lot of elements of this central vase in it with the flowers coming out. And that was worked in 1722 in Mrs. Wallace's school, which was a Hackney boarding school. But I would date this to perhaps even a little bit earlier, to around the period of about 1710, 1715.
Well, this piece is just a delight, you know, to have been ogling all of the other 17th century embroidery in the gallery here, and then to actually have the time to just look at this and see what it has to offer.
Well, when you look
It's
at it close
amazing.
up, it really is. And you've got this, the stag here with the strawberry, the butterflies. It actually does have a lot of elements of things that we might now associate with Norfolk darning samplers.
This
but
carnation
in an
is
earlier
just
format.
really impressive.
Yeah, I mean, the work is incredible. I mean, it really is a phenomenal, and it's the scale as well, because it's
Oh, it's huge.
a substantial piece.
I'm glad we talked about it.
Just a few more views of some of the wonderful pieces that were on display and for sale during the exhibition. This amazing whitework sampler, and then a few stumpwork pieces that we hadn't talked about during the interview before I leave. The exhibition Choice and Precious Work, The Needle and Beyond, 1650 to 1770, is open from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. each day from October 21st, 2024 to Saturday, 23rd of November, 2024. It is near Oxford if you happen to be in the UK.
Wow, what a great time did we have with Rebecca looking at all of the needlework that is on display at the moment as part of the exhibition. Make sure to get a catalog so that you have a permanent record of some of the things that we saw. It's amazing, lovely new research, essays by multiple people. You can look down below here, right below, click the more that you see down below in the description area, and you'll find the links to how to get a catalog for the exhibition. And if you like this type of content, please subscribe.